Illustrator, customizing fonts. My name is Anna Kopinska, and I will be your not chat moderator, I will be your presenter for this class. And moderating my chat is Nathan. Nathan, would you like to say hello? Silence from Nathan. Okay. I'm sure some of you have questions about what Illustrator is. And Illustrator is a software that is part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. It is a software used for vector graphics, and vector graphics are drawings that can scale infinitely and work independently of resolution. This means that they will never pixelate, and this differs from raster images. So Photoshop is a raster program, and it works with pixels. And you can see here, if you zoom in really close, that the pixels will start to show, and you'll see this grid of different colored squares. However, vector images are all based on mathematical formulas, and when you zoom in, they still maintain their crisp clarity. At least they do inside the program like Illustrator, and if you save them as a scalable vector graphic. So Illustrator is often used by graphic designers, artists, illustrators, and web designers to create logos, icons, and illustrations. And today we are going to be talking all about fonts and how to customize fonts in Illustrator. So I'm going to exit my little PowerPoint here. There are exercise files for this class. If you go to our Plano Public Library Google Drive, you can go to the Adult Learning tab, Digital Creation, Adobe Illustrator Customizing Fonts, and you will see that you can download an Illustrator file right here that we are going to be walking through, and you can also download a handout for the class. So I believe Nathan has dropped that link in the chat, and we are going to show you, if we select these, we can go ahead and download them. I have already downloaded these, so I'm just going to open my downloads folder. Once they're in your downloads folder, if you're working on a PC versus a Mac, like I am today, you're going to want to extract them. So to extract them, you're going to want to right-click and hit Extract All. You can extract them into the same destination. And here you will see we have our Illustrator file and our PDF. Our handout has a lot of helpful notes. So if you normally take notes during a class, you can just kind of refer to the handout if you missed something. And it also kind of talks about all of the techniques that we will be going through today. The Illustrator file, however, you can open it just by double clicking, which is what I think I will do. But while Illustrator is opening, you can also open Illustrator by going to the Adobe Creative Cloud icon on your computer, hitting Illustrator and hitting open, and then opening the file that way. I'm going to ignore the fact that I can't find the linked file. Everything should be fine. So with our fonts, I guess I'll do a brief overview of Illustrator. This isn't an Illustrator Basics class. If you want to know more about the basics of Illustrator, we do have recordings of that on our YouTube. But just a quick overview, this is our menu bar up top. This is an options bar. Here are all of our tools on the left. Here are some panels on the right. When we click on these icons, little pop-up boxes show up with the different tools that we need to alter our file. So we will be going over these in a bit more detail during the class, but that's our brief navigation of Illustrator. So we are talking about customizing fonts today, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. And I guess a lot of people ask, why do we care about fonts, right? Why do we care about typography? And I think it's just such an important part of visual language. When communicating through speech, you can say things in a different tone, you can say things in different ways, and that can be just as or even more important than the actual words that you choose to say, right? I could be yelling right now, and even though my words would be perfectly fine, you would not want to listen to me because I'm yelling. And while written communication can be more neutral and straightforward, the font that you choose and the way that you use typography can either enhance or detract from your message. I think that typography is kind of our way to try to mimic that speech and tone, that friendliness level. Typography is the style and appearance of printed matter, and it can help capture your audience's attention, and it can establish a hierarchy of information that is being conveyed. So if something is really big, that's what your attention is going to be drawn to first, right? And then maybe the smaller text is something that you read once you get closer to the poster or sign. If you're part of a business, typography can help build and fortify brand recognition. There are certain fonts that everybody just recognizes as being part of a brand. And typography has a visual voice or personality of its own and can convey either professionalism or any number of emotions. And while there are a number of terms associated with typography, these little terms here underneath are big words. These are basics that can help get you started. So a sans serif is a font that doesn't have any serifs for the letter forms. Sans serif fonts are perceived as modern, friendly, and minimal. Sans serif fonts are used for text on screens and are frequently used for headers. Serif fonts are letters that do have these serifs or feet. So you can see in the R in modern, the R has this line at the base of it and this line at the top of it that our sans serif font didn't have. These are little feet. These are serifs. And serif fonts are perceived as more traditional, classic, or even elegant. And serif fonts are usually used for printed text due to their high readability. So if you're doing a layout for a book that you want published in actual print, you would want to probably use a serif font. Slab serifs are a font that features squared off serifs. You can see these are a little bit more dainty and a little bit more delicate, whereas these are bold. And this gives them that blocky, sturdy appearance that is great for bold messages. And slab serif fonts are usually used for display fonts. So if you have a poster and you have a title on that poster, you might use a slab serif font, but you probably wouldn't want to use it on all of the paragraph text. Script fonts, such as this font that says artistic, are fonts that are designed to capture the flourish and artistry of traditional hand lettering and calligraphy. Script fonts are usually decorative in nature and are better suited for display fonts than set text. So again, we probably wouldn't want to read whole paragraphs of this, but maybe if we're doing like a wedding invitation or something and we write the names of the people getting married in this font, that's perfectly acceptable. There's also black letter type. These are fonts designed to evoke medieval or Gothic calligraphy. Black letter fonts can evoke feelings of history, formality, and power, or mystery and sophistication. Because of how detailed and ornate these are best used for short amounts of text. We could have a monospaced font. Monospaced fonts, each letter has a set width. So this letter M takes up the same amount of space as this letter I and this letter N and all of the letters in this font, basically. Monospaced fonts are typically associated with typewriters and early computers, but they are a great choice if you wish to convey a sparse, minimalist feeling. And this monospaced font does have serifs, but not all monospaced fonts have serifs. You can have serif or sans serif monospaced fonts. You can also have hand fonts. These are designed to look as if they were written by hand, usually with a pen or a marker. Although they are similar to script fonts a little bit, hand fonts have a more intimate, personal feel, as though you're receiving a handwritten letter from a friend, compared to the more fancy script writing. So this would be a little bit more elegant, sophisticated. This is a little bit more impersonal. And then we have decorative fonts, and fonts in the decorative category can vary widely in feeling. These fonts are typically created for advertising purposes, and they can evoke so many different feelings. You can have casual decorative fonts, you can have creative decorative fonts, dramatic, such as this one, flexible, urban. It really just kind of depends on your decorative font. We also have a number of font properties. And I promise these will come into play a little bit and you will see more about them. But we have different font weights. The weight of a font indicates how thick the lines that make up the letter forms are. They can be light, such as this, or they can be heavy or regular right in the middle. There's also the width of the font. It indicates how wide the letters are. It can be condensed, regular, or extended. There's X height. This indicates where most letters reach, such as the hump in the lowercase h, or the height of the lowercase letters, such as X. It's why it's called X height, because it's usually where the X, how tall the X is. And this can be low, regular, or high. High X height characters can make capital letters harder to distinguish. This will look like a smaller font, even if it's the same exact size as a high X height font, just because these take up so much more space than these do. And then there's also contrast. And contrast indicates how much variation is in the weight of the letters. Fonts that have low contrast have no variation. So you can see this is just a line that goes around the circle O. And fonts that have high contrast have a lot of variation. So you can see here's the thickest part of the O. Let me zoom in a little bit more, even though it's a little pixelated. Here's the thickest part of the O, and then here's the thinnest part of the O, and then it gets thick again, and then it gets thin. And then regular contrast has somewhere in the middle where usually the top and bottom are a little thinner, but it's not as pronounced as high contrast letters. So I promised you that we would actually be doing things in Illustrator. And I can move that there, I think. Here we are going to be talking just about the type tool. The type tool is the basic tool used for text in Illustrator. And when we click it, we can either kind of, interesting. Okay, it would help if I was on the right layer. I'm going to create a new layer on top of all of these. So when I click on the type tool, I can just click directly on my layer. And by clicking on my layer, you can see something called lorem ipsum showed up. Lorem ipsum is a placeholder text. It's Latin, it's a very standard placeholder text. It's supposed to give you the feel of language without actually having to write out every single word. So if you're just creating a layout, lorem ipsum is really helpful for that. That said, if we just click, we have our text box and we can type in anything we want. Right now, everything is extending in one line because we clicked on the layer on the artboard, and it started from that point where we clicked, and it's just continuing on in one line. Of course, if we wanted double lines, I could hit enter. If, on the other hand, though, we're creating a bit more of like a newspaper layout or something, and we know that we want 2 columns, I probably wouldn't use Illustrator for this. I would use InDesign, but I digress. If we wanted a set area for the type to fill, we could click and drag and kind of create a rectangle. And there you can see that rectangle was filled with that lorem ipsum font. So this can definitely be replaced. You can just hit the backspace key and you can still see Illustrator retained that outline of the text box. So even if we start typing something else, it's maintaining the borders of that text box, and it would allow us to fill. if you ever have a text box and you accidentally delete the placeholder text and then you want to refill it, we can hit fill with placeholder text. But let's say I've got this paragraph and I wanted to add a sentence to the beginning. Okay. Perfect. You'll see Illustrator has given us still this blue box around our text box, but it's also given us this little red plus sign in the corner here. And it's getting smaller as I zoom in, so I guess I'm not going to do that. But this allows us to know that there is overfill text in here. And what we can do with that is we can hit our type tool, we can click that plus sign, and we can create a new text box. Okay, we can use our selection tool, click on that overfill. And right now you'll see that my cursor has changed. And instead of being just a black arrow, it's got some text underneath it. In this case, I can just click to create a new text box that's the same size as my original one. Or if I decide that maybe my text box here is a little bit different, I can create a smaller text box or a bigger text box. And it will fill that text box. So you can also do this by, let's pretend I didn't click that. If I have a rectangle here, or maybe even a circle, I can go ahead and click that plus icon and then click on my circle. And it should have filled with the text. Okay, I've got my cursor lined up. There it goes. Okay, sometimes you have to click a few more times on that plus icon than I'm really used to. But you can also make circles text boxes or anything else that you would really want to be a text box. So that kind of covers our type tool. We are going to scroll down just a little bit. And down here, you can see we've got some sample text. And in my layers panel, I'm going to unlock those examples. We can write out love, and we can change a lot of things in the character menu. So if I go to window and I scroll down to type, I can open the character menu, or that's also the Control-T shortcut. And here I have a little window that pops up. In the character menu, we can change a lot of things about this font. So of course, if I highlight everything, I can change the font to be not Myriad Pro, which is what this first selection is. This is your font family. You can change it to any font that you have downloaded onto your computer. You can also hit this Find More icon, and this allows you to access the Adobe fonts. If you have access to Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud, then you have access to Adobe fonts as well. And there's thousands of different fonts that you can choose from. It gets a little overwhelming sometimes, and this is where we can filter fonts. Every single term that we had gone over in the beginning of the class, we have a filter for. So you can select sans serif fonts, you can select serif fonts, slab serif, script, black letter, monospaced, hand, or decorative fonts. So I'm going to select decorative fonts. And you can see there's a variety of different options. I can also select different properties. The classification, you can only choose one classification at a time. There's very rarely decorative fonts that also identify themselves as sans serif fonts. But you can hit multiple properties at the same time that you have a classification selected. So we could say that we wanted a heavyweight sans serif font with extended width and high X height and low contrast, and so on and so forth. We can choose as many of these properties as we would like, and that the fonts list would get smaller based on our choices. So for this font, I'm just going to mimic this. This was Gill Sans MT. Okay, lovely. Gill Sans MT. We can change the font style. So a lot of font styles you're probably familiar with. There's regular, italic, bold, bold italic. However, a lot of the Adobe fonts have even more font styles associated with them. And especially decorative fonts have different font styles. They won't just be bold, they will also have lines, or they will be small caps only, or all caps only. They have different variations basically on the font. So I am going to select bold. We can change the font size right here. It's that big T and little t icon, and we can increase it by changing the arrow keys, I guess. We can go down and select a certain size from the drop-down menu, or if we have a size, we can also go to T and, okay. Illustrator goes through a lot of updates, and it used to be that you could change the size of a font by clicking and dragging the text box. I guess now it only changes the size of the text box, which is a nice feature as well. So if you have the selection tool selected, you can change the size of your text box. And I think I will make that a little bit smaller so that it just hovers around my word itself. We can also change the leading. So if I had, I know that I just changed my text box, I'm going to change it again. So the leading refers to how much space is in between the lines of text. So right now my leading is set to 57.6 and my font is set to 48. If I lower the leading, you will see that my fonts start getting really close to each other and even can overlap each other, which is not the look that I'm going for today. Leading refers to, in the old days, when people had each letter as its own stamp in letter presses. Leading is how much lead they would put in between the lines of the letters for the lines. Okay, so that's leading. We also have kerning. Kerning right now is set to auto. Kerning is something that's a little tricky to explain. It refers to the horizontal space between a pair of individual letters. And for most display text, letters should be kerned for visual balance. Whole text kerning can be adjusted via Illustrator for optical balance from the drop-down menu. So right now we've got it auto, and if we set optical, I hope that you can see the slight difference. The letters just move ever so slightly inward. There's a little bit more space between the I and the C. The O moved over to the L a little bit. If we set the cursor in between any two letters, we can individually adjust that kerning. So we might adjust the kerning to space it out a lot more. And you can see even as I'm holding down this key, it's really very minute adjustments. I'm going to shift it back over. Basically, you just want to make sure that where the letters are looks visually balanced. And if it looks good to you, then it probably looks good to other people. There's different kerning games that you can play online to kind of train yourself to see the best optical kerning agreed by like graphic designers and stuff. So definitely look into those if kerning is something that you're interested in. Finally, we have tracking, and tracking is very similar to kerning, but whereas kerning is just the space in between two different letters, there's tracking, which refers to all of the space between the letters. So you can see if I increase my tracking, the letters start moving further and further apart. And they're still kerned properly. It's just that now they have wide tracking. And they take up a little bit more space. And you can absolutely adjust tracking for just one word as opposed to another. So we could have love and music take up the same amount of visual space if we track appropriately. So there. Even though music is clearly a much bigger word than love, through tracking, we were able to make them take up the same amount of space. Okay, I am going to create another text box. And here I will fill it with music. And I will make my text box a little bit bigger. Move that out of the way a little bit. I said move it out of the way a little bit. And now I'm going to copy this font, which is charcuterie cursive. It would help if I wasn't filtering. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is something that not every single font has. There are things called glyphs, and depending on the font family, your selected typeface may have glyphs or alternate letter forms for each letter. The option to add glyphs is typically found in script, black letter, hand, or decorative fonts, but glyphs can exist for any font classification. So even if you have a serif or sans serif font, you might have glyphs. And to see if a font has alternates, what you can do is you can highlight the individual letter. So in this case, I selected the C, and you will see glyphs show up underneath. So we can change the C to have this swooping curling tail. We can have it kind of do a little swirly swirl. We can have it go up and above. That looks pretty nice, actually. Or that looks too much like various letters. Alternatively, oops, I kind of ruined it. You can open the glyphs window. So I'm going to close out of this and not have anything highlighted. I'm going to go to Window, Type, and open my glyphs. And we can show the entire font for charcuterie cursive. Interesting. There it goes. Okay, just took a second to load, I guess. You can see charcuterie cursive in particular has a lot of different glyphs. They have glyphs for different like letters that have diacritics and accents on them. They have alternate letter forms for like the letter C. They have a lot of different glyphs. And if we wanted to, we could move that there, right? There we go. Okay. So I'm just moving both my character menu and my glyphs menu to this panel so that I can open it and close it as I wish. That said, I think I want to change back to my original. And I will delete my music. And right now I'm noticing that it seems like the tracking on this font is a little bit intense. It looked like it was -56. And that's not ideal. I wanted to track it out just a little bit further so that the letters really have space. to move around. Okay, so now comes the fun part of the class. We have talked about the type tool extensively and how we can customize things with the type tool, but there's also various customization processes that we can do with these various fonts. So I am going to move my love and my music over here. Okay. So right now the text is just a straight line, right? I'm going to make my box a little bit smaller around both of those. But right now it's just a straight line. It's not very exciting. Well, we have the option to edit it via an envelope distortion. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, but the most common way to distort text is through the envelope distortion. And we would select our text and go to the menu, and then under object, we see that there's the option to envelope distort. It would help if I had something selected. And then you can see that there's the make with warp option, there's the make with mesh option, and then there's make with top object. And we will talk about all of these. So we can make with warp. And here under warp, you will see that there's different styles of warp. Right now we have it in an arc. However, we could do an arc lower, arc upper. We could have an arch, or we could have a flag. Flags are very popular. And in addition to all of these, you'll see that there's different distortions that you can add to it. So we can adjust the bend in the flag. So maybe we don't want the flag to be that noticeable, or maybe we want the flag to be very noticeable, waving up and down. So you can adjust how this bends and change your distortion. You can also adjust horizontal distortion to make one side bigger and then kind of taper and get smaller on the opposite end, or of course the opposite way around. And you can also do the same thing with the vertical, where you make the top really big, or maybe the bottom really big. So you can play around with these as you would wish. And then when you're happy with it, you can click OK. However, I wanted to point out that you can always edit either the envelope itself. So right now, we have, if I wanted to adjust the style of my envelope, I could, again, maybe select a rise this time and adjust all of those options here. Or if I wanted to, I could cancel. I believe there is a way to actually open this up in the dialog box again, but I'm not entirely sure right now. But you can adjust the bend, the distortion, as we did in that dialog box. And you can change either the warp, or you can edit the contents of the warp. So maybe we no longer want to say the word love. And maybe we want to say hello. It's a text box that's no longer big enough for the word hello. And maybe by selecting the direct selection tool. There is a way to actually make your text box bigger, and I forgot that way. So I am sorry, but you can absolutely always edit the contents of your envelope distortion in addition to actually changing how it is being distorted. So I think we have successfully talked about warping with mesh. I'm going to Control Z, undo a lot. No, no. Perfect. Okay. You can also distort with a mesh. So I'm going to do object, envelope distort, and make with mesh. And when we create a mesh, you'll see this rectangle has popped up over our letters, and it's asking for how many rows and how many columns we want. Typically for letters, if it's just one line of text, you don't need that many rows. I usually do 2. And then for columns, you want, it kind of depends on how many letters you have, how long your word is. So I like to increase my columns until they look about square. The little boxes inside the rectangle look about square, and that looks good to me. This doesn't look too exciting. We just changed the warp. What's going on? Well, with our direct selection tool, we can select these individual anchor points, and we can decide how these letters, how each point of this shape is adjusted. So I hope that you can see there's a lot of exciting options that you can do with the mesh envelope distortion. It just really depends on how comfortable you are with messing around with these. You can see there's little handles. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. There's little handles, and you can adjust these handles and change how the text is lying. So if you're comfortable changing shapes around using the direct selection tool, mesh is great for you. But finally, whoop, I'm going to undo all of that again. Finally, we can envelope distort with a top object. So right under here, I have an example. This isn't the world's best example, and I recognize it, but I hope that you've seen typography kind of similar to this, right? Where the words kind of change shape and they fill different spaces. They have interesting ways that they kind of interconnect. And you can absolutely do that with the envelope distortion. So right now, you will see in the layers panel, I've got envelope distortion, and you'll see pretty much all of the paths are on top, which is what we want. But if I hide the paths, you'll see that I typed out all of my words first. So I typed out when words fail, music speaks. And I chose my font the way that I normally would. This is all just regular text boxes. I didn't do anything too fancy with it. But on top of them, I put these various shapes that are in orange. And right now we have one shape, which we can move on top of the word again, which is what we want. We want the top object to be a shape and the bottom object to be a word, whatever our text box is. So if I highlight both, if I select both, you'll see in the layers panel, right now I have both the path selected and when, and I go up to object, envelope distort, and make with top object, you'll see that my word fills the object entirely. I'm going to repeat that real quick. And that one's not looking too good, is it? And we will talk about how to kind of troubleshoot that in a second. I just wanted to kind of do this for all of them. Okay. And now we can talk a little bit about altering. Just like we were able to edit the envelope and edit the contents before, we can do that now as well. And using this direct selection tool, I can change up my anchor points just a little bit. And I can make that F look a little bit better. And you can do this as well if once you look at your envelope distortions, if you see that, oh, maybe I want more space for that S, or I don't like the way that that S is kind of hanging out, I can adjust this handle and kind of see if I can play around with the anchor points and the handles to really let the font speak for itself, right? So that covers the basics of our envelope distortions. So far, though, I just realized I haven't talked about color at all. Right now, all of our text has been black. If we wanted to change the color of our text, you'll see that we have the properties menu and we can change the fill color. So I think that I had purple. That's the tricky part. So right now when I selected purple for the fill, I didn't realize it, but I was actually adjusting the envelope as opposed to editing the contents. So you want to make sure that you're editing the contents when you're doing this, but then you can select purple and the entire distortion will appear purple. So once again, I'm going to edit contents. I'm going to select fill and get that magenta color. And so on and so forth. You can change. I don't know that I like that color. Okay, much better. You can continue changing the colors of your fonts to anything you would like. Okay, so one of my favorite things to do, though, is to intertwine words. So I'm going to use this love and music, and I'm going to move them over here. Forget what colors I chose. Okay, it looks like blue for my music and pink for my love. So usually when you layer things on top of each other, one object is fully on top of the other, right? I can either have music be on top of the love, or if I go around to my layer, I can move my love to be on top of my music. That's not very exciting, is it? There's the option, however, in Illustrator to intertwine. And for my music, I'm going to want to change the opacity a little bit to maybe 70-ish%, 76-ish. And now I can kind of see the letter love a little bit better through the music, but it's still not great. So I'm going to select both of my objects. And in the object layer, I'm going to go to intertwine and make. And then you will see Illustrator has these areas selected where I can click and just that part of the letter goes behind the L. And I can choose to make that come forward. And where you choose to put things in front or behind is entirely up to you. I think the M and U are pretty good. Maybe I want the I to kind of go behind. Maybe I want the C to go behind and then loop around back in front. So if we zoom back out a little bit, we can see now that we have really intertwined these where it's not entirely clear which one is on top and which one's on bottom. Let's say that I have clicked off, I have committed to that intertwine, and I realize later, well, actually, I think that this part would be better behind the O. You can definitely change it. If you select the object and go back to object intertwine, you can edit. And then that allows you to move certain spots back behind or in front. Okay. So there is that. I think I'm going to undo all of the intertwining that I just did though, because we also want to talk about expanding objects. And I think I'm going to adjust this low a little bit. So typically when you are dealing with type, you are dealing with text that is still editable. And while this offers many benefits, it does limit the other tools that you can use. So we can use different options from the dialog menus, but really we can't use any of these tools if I wanted to maybe make this L a little bit curvier or something. And you can, however, for further customization of typography, choose to commit to the shape the letters are currently taking and then alter the shape that the letter forms are taking. So right now, Illustrator recognizes this as an L, but I could say, Illustrator, forget that this is an L in this font, just memorize this shape, and I'm going to edit this shape. So in order to do that, we are going to select our type using the selection tool. And in the menu bar, we are going to go to Object, Expand. There it is. And it's asking us to expand the object and the fill. That's perfect. We want to say OK. And now it doesn't look like anything has changed, but we won't be able to change this type. If I suddenly realized, oh no, I have a typo in here. I meant to spell L-U-R-V-E, LURV. That wouldn't be able to happen. But what can happen is that I can alter these individual shapes. Right now, you can see this L can be a lot smaller or the same size. And the best part is what we can do with the direct selection tool and other tools. So with the direct selection tool selected, you can either make the L completely rounded. If you just select one of these anchor points, you can make just that one point rounded. So maybe I want my letters to be a little bit more rounded. Oop. I meant to just select that one. Yeah. And then probably for my E as well, just select the corner. Okay. And then maybe I think, I think that this E is a little too long. I can select the anchor points in here and I can just shift them, too much, using the arrow keys until about there. So we had love starting off in a certain font, but then we changed it completely. We can also change the font, using the pencil tool. So I'm going to select the pencil tool. And I'm going to select this letter form and then the pencil tool. And I'm going to kind of create a little heart. It didn't quite work the way that I wanted it to. Okay. We are going to create a little heart. What should be happening, what I'm expecting to happen, is this line should change based on how I'm connecting to it. There we go. So now I can do this to here. Okay, and that's a bit of a wonky looking heart, but hopefully you get the idea that with the various tools, and you could keep altering this with either the pen tool, the pencil tool, the paintbrush tool. You could use a bunch of different tools now that these are shapes and kind of change up how the letter forms look. And that's what you get from expanding the object. Again, the text is no longer editable, but you can drastically change the letters. Next up, we are going to talk about, oh, oops. I meant to talk about expanding objects on that page, my bad. Next, we are going to talk about clipping masks though. And clipping masks kind of look like this down here, where you kind of have this image that shows through your letters, right? I chose sing as the example for this, but you can choose whatever word you want. You can choose maybe like a beach scene and like the word vacation or island or getaway, right? Relax. You can choose a number of different combinations for this effect. And for this effect to work, you need your image on the bottom and you need your text on top. And once you have those two ready, you can select both of them and go right click on it and just select make clipping mask. And it's really that simple. Right now, your clipping mask it allows you to alter, if you double click on the clipping mask, it allows you to alter maybe the size of the image or the positioning of the image. So we can change that if we wanted to. We could change where the letters are on top of it. But once we click off of it and just single click it, once we click off of it, just single click it, the whole thing moves in tandem with itself. And you can put a rectangle underneath it with a black background. Right now it's on top. I'm going to right click, arrange, send to back. And now it looks like my microphone picture is on top. And there's kind of like these holes in maybe a curtain or something, and I'm seeing through. Okay. And now I think it's time to talk about our alternate type tools. We have been talking a lot about text boxes, and sometimes, as I showed you with the ellipse, we don't necessarily need boxes. Under this type tool, if you long click it, you'll see that there's a bunch of other tools selected on it, and there's the area type tool. And if you already have a shape, such as this circle right here on the bottom of the music note, you can click on the path. You have to make sure that when you're clicking, I hope that you can see on your screen, there's this little pink thing that tells me path when I'm clicking. And it allows me to fill with placeholder text. Right now, I'm going to make my font a lot smaller and then click fill with placeholder text again. And right now the problem is my leading. My font is 6, but my leading is 48. So I'm going to change my leading again to be about 6. And it would help if I changed the whole thing. And now when I click fill with placeholder text, it's going to fill the entire shape. And you can do that here as well. With the area type tool, click on that, and that's filled. Click on this little parallelogram. And that's filled as well. So we can have text in really interesting kind of shapes laid out. However, right now we've only been talking about text that has been set in straight lines. So if you want your text to follow a different line or a curve, you absolutely could. There's the type on a path tool, which is this tool right here. And you kind of want to select somewhere along this path, and that's where your text will start. So you can see that I started in the middle of the line, but I hope you can see these like blue lines with these white squares next to it. And if we select it with the direct selection tool, we can actually move where the start of the type on a path tool starts. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Okay, select that. And now it looks like I don't know how to click on a silly square. This is why I really like starting on the line first and then moving out. But we could continue filling this with placeholder text, and it goes all the way along the line. And if we increase the size of it now, we have overflow text, which is what I wanted. And with overflow text, what we can do is we can, oh, excuse me. We can click on this red plus sign. Our cursor has changed, and we can click on this path again, and you will see that it's following the path. We're going to click on that new plus icon, click on, I'm trying to click on that plus icon. Sometimes it's a little fiddly. There it goes. And we can continue to create these lines. One thing that I want to mention about the type on a path tool is that frequently it's done with ellipses. And we type on the path. We type on a path. You can, of course, change where the font starts and ends by using the direct selection tool and changing where those blue squares are, which I am not going to fiddle around with right now. But also, if you double click on this, you can see that there's different effects. Right now it's aligning to the baseline, but you can select. You should be able to select the different types. Descender, center. Oh, it's not previewing. That's why, previewing. So depending on where that line is, you can either have the font follow the line exactly, or go in a little bit towards the center. It all really depends on the effect that you're looking for when you're talking about that circle. Okay. Under the type tool, we also have the vertical type tools. I'm not going to go over these too far in detail. The vertical type tools are very similar. It's just in a vertical format instead of a horizontal format. So you can fill an area, you can type on a path vertically. The last tool that I really want to touch on is the touch type tool. And this actually works best if you already have some text, maybe music, yeah. If I click on the touch type tool, now that I have this selected, I can click on each individual letter. And with this touch type tool, I can move, scale, stretch, or rotate the letters while allowing the text to remain editable. So I can make this M maybe a little bit wider and maybe a little bit bigger than all of the others. But this M is still editable. And I can change it later on if I realize, oh no, I misspelled music and it's actually spelled with an N now. We can rotate. So I don't think that this works perfectly with this font, but it kind of can. We can move the letters. make them bigger. We can, of course, change glyph and then make it bigger and move it up. And just moving these with the touch type tool, like I said before, we can still edit the text. So if I wanted to spell music with a Z, I absolutely could, and then go back with the touch type tool and move these back over. So that brings us to the end of our class. Thank you so much for attending. I wanted to let you know that this class has been recorded and it will be up on our Plano Library YouTube soon. If you're not already familiar, Plano Library allows you to access both LinkedIn Learning and Udemy. In order to access those, you would go to Research and Learn, or there's also that Research and Learn button. They both take you to the same place. Because LinkedIn Learning and Udemy are considered learning for career classes, they're going to be under business or career. But you can scroll down and you have access to LinkedIn Learning, which has a lot of different video tutorials on Illustrator, but also on other subjects such as computer coding, Word, Excel, how to public speak. It also has how to play guitar and various other courses. So it has a lot of different courses. If you're interested in learning something, I would highly recommend either LinkedIn Learning, or we just got access to Udemy. And Udemy is very similar to LinkedIn Learning. It's just a different database of videos. And I'd highly recommend for you to search those. As I mentioned earlier, we do also have our Plano Library YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/Plano Public Library, you should get us. You can also just search for Plano Public Library and it should show up. If you scroll over, you can search for various other courses. If you're interested in more on Illustrator, you can search for Illustrator. And you can see that we have, well, our Illustrator Basics class, various different tools such as adding color, logo design, all sorts of different classes. So check us out on YouTube, or just check us out in general. We would love to see you at the library, or give us a call if you have any further questions. My name is Anna Kopinska, and I really appreciate you sharing time with me. If you have any questions about this class in particular, you can email me at annak@plano.gov. We also have a Plano Library Speaks podcast that I forgot to mention, but I think I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you so much for attending our virtual program. You can find more resources at our website, planolibrary.org, or our blog, planolibrarylearns.org, and listen to our podcast. Have a great day.
We did have one quick question in the chat.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
If you have time to answer it.
Absolutely. I do. I don't know if people have time to stick around.
Maybe not. It says, can we create our own font and upload it and edit it?
The short answer is yes. That is a much more complicated question than I can answer right now. There's different programs that allow you to create your own font. Illustrator is great for creating the letter forms, but it's not great for actually packaging it so that you create your own font, right? It doesn't recognize that the keystroke M should create this letter form. So you would have to have a different software, and there's some online softwares as well that allow you to create your own handwriting. You can download that font once it's off of that software to your computer, and once it's on your computer, you should be able to access it via Illustrator just as you would normally. You don't have to import it specially. If it's on your computer, then it should be openable in Illustrator in your character menu. Does that help?
It looks like they specified meant creating it on paper and uploading it on Illustrator and then edit.
Okay. I think that you could do that with Illustrator. I think there's different apps and different applications for computers and stuff that would allow you to do that better. If you wanted to create like a hand font, I would not necessarily go with Illustrator specifically. I would look at what are the best handwriting font converters, and see one that is free or fits your budget, and see what you can do with that. It's not something I would recommend working on specifically in Illustrator, but you could absolutely create your own font and then import it into Illustrator. Hopefully that helps. I don't know that that's the answer that I wanted to give. Working on a font in Illustrator is a very hard task. It's a very big undertaking, and I just know that there's a lot of other applications out there that make it a much simpler process.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have in chat.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you for attending.